Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy February. If you're in Flagstaff, all the snow has melted. It's gorgeous and the weather is wonderful. It's kind of hard to believe that the last time we did one of these webinars, it was icy outside, and I'm pretty sure I was due to shovel my driveway again. So I am loving this right now. I hope all of you are doing well. I'm so happy you're able to join us tonight. My name is Megan Remington. I'm our Community Education Coordinator here at Coconino Community College. And I'm so happy that we have Ashlee with us tonight. So funny story, she had reached out about having a webinar talk with us. And at the time she hadn't realized that she knew me through her work that she used to do over at NAU. So she was a student worker at NAU. And then did you work for NAU after you were a student too?
Yeah, I went full time. Yeah.
Okay, that was it. Okay, that's right. And so it was just too funny that we had this moment of like, oh my gosh, it's so great to see you. So I promise you, you are in for a treat tonight. I'm going to disappear from this webinar and let her take over from here. But just so everybody knows, I'm going to be monitoring our Q&A and our chat box. If you have any questions along the way, we'll try to put questions at the end. But if you have a question throughout that is applicable to what Ashlee is saying right now, I'll kind of bump in and interrupt and let her know. But otherwise, Ashlee, you take it away, and I'm gonna hide away for a little while, and I'll see you guys at the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Just give me 1 second to put that up. Okay. Wow. Thank you so much, Megan, for allowing me to be here. Thank you for everybody that has shown up. I'm so happy to be here. So excited to talk about this topic, funding our future, and talking about financial wellness for millennials, Gen Z, and beyond that. We're going to dive into a lot of topics. So I might talk a little fast, but I promise you can ask questions at the very end. And I'm a resource here, so you can even ask me questions beyond this call. So let's get started. Oh, there we go. Okay. So you might be asking yourself, like, why is this girl talking about this topic? And I want to share with you because it's near and dear to my heart. So a little bit of backstory about me is I am a 26-year-old designer turned money coach. My husband and I have paid off over $140,000 in debt. We funded a wedding in cash, and we are well on our way to becoming multimillionaires. Now, I don't share that with you to brag. I share that with you to let you know that we have been through the ringer when it comes to finances. And that's why I'm so passionate about talking about this topic, because we have seen the other side of the coin of just drowning in debt. And I want to help other people get on the right side with finances, be confident in their finances. And so it's my mission and passion now to empower people to gain control of their finances so that they have the freedom to live intentionally. So a little bit of our backstory, and I'm going to breeze through this kind of quick, but a little bit of our backstory is in 2015, we started our marriage with over $225,000 in debt, and 90% of that was student loans, which that's a really big number when you just think about student loans. So in 2016, we got on a plan and we paid off $21,000 while still in college. Fast forward a couple more years, we paid off $63,000 in debt, and we were just on a roll. I was so passionate about this topic that I decided to actually get a financial coaching certification. Then, 2020, we all have had a 2020. But I've decided in, at the beginning of 2020, before pre-pandemic, that I was going to quit my job and launch my business. It's called Beyond Millions full time, and dive into this. And 2020 happened, the pandemic happened, but my husband and I were still able to pay off over $140,000 in debt. And we know that we will retire multimillionaires, and I'm going to share with you how to do that in this talk. So I'm really excited about that. And it's just, I'm on a mission to help others do the same. So in today's agenda, we're going to talk about problems that Gen X and Z are facing today. We're going to understand why it's so different than it was 30 or 40 years ago. We're going to talk about some basic financial wellness tips that I have for you and how you can implement that into your own lives. And then we're going to also talk about how to coach loved ones through financial hardships to growing wealth and just being financially well as a whole. And at the very end, I'm going to have Q&A, so you can ask me any questions and I will be happy to answer them. Okay, so before we hop in, I think it's really important to set some ground rules because we're going to talk about a lot of things today that might be sensitive. Money can be a really sensitive topic, and I want to be respectful of that. So these ground rules also are not just for this specific Comet talk, but it's also just navigating life and money in general. So the first one is there's no shame. You're not going to get any shame from me about where your current financial status is, right? I just shared that my husband and I were over $225,000 in debt. So zero shame. Wherever you're starting, there's no shame. And it's just, if you have shame around money, I just want you to know that it's not welcome in here anymore. And this honestly isn't just to be nice, right? I love to be nice, but it's not just to be nice. It's also psychology. So when you are ashamed about something, you tend to hide it and keep it secret, and you don't want to face it. And when you don't face money, things can happen. Debt can pile up. You're not investing into your future. And so I want us to just totally eliminate shame from the game. The next rule is you are never too far. No matter what your current financial situation is, you are not too far gone. There is always hope. Okay, the next rule is that everybody here can learn. We all have an opportunity to learn something new, no matter what stage of life we're in. Even if you are retired, you might have kids, older children who are experiencing some financial hardships. And I'm going to share with you how to help them navigate their finances. The next ground rule that I have for you is to be respectful of one another. I just like to say, let's follow the golden rule. The next one is happiness isn't found in money. We all know the saying that money can't buy happiness, which is 100% true. Of course, it can buy experiences, which can make us happy. But when we buy stuff, it's just not happy. So not only am I coming to speak to you today about how to become financially well, I honestly want you to create a life that you just love living, that's not necessarily centered around just building a ton of wealth, right? That would be great, but it would be even better if I can teach you how to live a life that you can live intentionally, that you can live on your own terms. And that's, again, something that I'm really passionate about doing. And the last ground rule is let's just have fun. Talking about money management can be fun, and I promise we will get into that in a later slide. So now that we have the ground rules set, it's time to talk about what each generation is facing today. So the first generation I want to talk about here is Gen X. And if you're Gen X, you're right around 41 to 56 years old. The average Gen X person has $125,000 in debt, including mortgage, credit cards, auto loans, student loans, personal loans, and that far exceeds the national average of consumer debt of $88,000 per adult. So that's many, many thousands of dollars over the national average. And we'll talk about how this happened in the coming slides. And not only that, but Gen X members are not only taking care of their children, but they're also taking care of their aging parents. So 39% feel that they never have as secure financial life as their parents' generation has had. And that's really important to note. So they're not only in debt, but they're feeling really financially insecure. And then 1 in 5 members of Gen X don't see retirement as a distant dream. They say that they'll never be able to afford to retire. And that's something that I'm coming here to combat. I want us to feel so financially secure in our lives, no matter what generation we're in, no matter where we're starting. And I'm going to share with you some tips to become financially secure. So the next generation is Gen Y. We commonly know them as millennials, and they're between the ages of 25 and 40, depending on, what chart you look at. So even though millennials have benefited from a 67% rise in wages since the 1970s, the increase hasn't actually kept up with the inflation of living costs. Not only that, but college tuition has also more than doubled since the 80s. And as a result, student loan debt is at an all-time high. And we're going to actually talk about in this talk how student loan debt, how this national debt crisis has occurred. So just hang in there with me. So the average student graduates with over $32,000 in debt. And then lastly, millennials are buying their first home today will pay 39% more than baby boomers who bought their first home in the 80s. And home ownership among millennials is at a record low. They're spending more time to save money to buy a house. And in some cities, it can take nearly a decade to save 20% for a down payment on a house. So millennials not only have student loan debt, but they're also not buying houses as their predecessor generations have done. And we're going to talk about why this is so important. And then the last generation I want to bring up is Gen Z. And now Gen Zs, those are the brand new generation, right? They are between the ages of 9 and 24 years old right now. So some of these stats don't really apply to those that are under 18. But for those that are between the ages of 18 and 24, this is what's happening. So 4 out of 5 Gen Z consumers, ages 18 through 21, say money matters are leading to a source of stress. So Gen Zers who are just out of the gate, just graduated from college, are already feeling financial stress. 12% of those anticipate they will be supported by their parents indefinitely, not just for the next couple of years, but they feel like their parents will have to support them indefinitely. And then 33% feel that they worry about money stress, like everyday expenses, things like food and travel. They are already worried about those. So as you can see, each generation has faced many challenges, and we're encountering a lot of different things here. Among other things, like debt is now socially acceptable. Debt wasn't always socially acceptable. We'll dive into the history of debt in just a couple of minutes, but it's important to know why this happened so that we can learn to grow individually and as a society. And now, on top of that, college is also expected. College used to be for the wealthy and the wealthy alone, and then it started to become expected. And then the financial burden shifted from the parents to the children. And we can see this especially when we talk about the millennial generation and how they take on an average of $32,000 in student loan debt. And then on top of that, expenses and expectations of living is at an all-time high. So modern day amenities aren't cheap, not to mention the expectations that are on us of owning more stuff. And that's not necessarily any person's fault. And again, we're going to talk about why. So now let's talk about the national debt crisis. All of these generations, millennials, Gen Z, they are going to inherit a debt legacy. That's what our country is giving them. Currently, the United States is over $27 trillion in debt. That's a trillion with a T, not billion, not million, but trillion. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how and why this happened. I feel like if we talk about this, it's easier to navigate how to get out of this situation. It's easier to understand how we got ourselves into this situation. And an interesting fact is that our country has only been debt-free once in history. That's it, one time in the entirety of our country's history. And I'm going to just quickly kind of breeze through history. This is super fascinating to me, but I know that this might not be super interesting to anybody else. But I wanted to hit on the major points. So The first one is that we're going all the way back to the Revolutionary War, where the founders led negotiations with Benjamin Franklin, and they secured over $2 million worth of loans from the French government, Dutch bankers, and from domestic creditors here in the US. In 1783, the Department of Finance reported the US debt reaching a total of $43 million. That's just where our country started. We had to pay we had to fund a war, which is expensive, in order to create our country. Fast forward a couple of years, then we have President Andrew Jackson. The War of 1812 brought the nation's debt to a total of $119.2 million. And President Jackson saw debt as a bad thing, and he really wanted to combat this debt crisis that we were experiencing. And so he decided to sell federally owned Western lands and block spending to make our country free of debt for the first and the only time in our country's history. And then we're going to go to the Civil War. So the Civil War is estimated to have cost the US $5.2 billion when it ended, and the government debt skyrocketed from $65 million to $2.6 billion. And then the collapse of J. Cooke and Company, a major bank invested in railroading, led to a 65-month depression, the longest in history. So that also led to the Great Depression and the stock market crash of 1929. We all know it as Black Tuesday. And that brought a market value loss of $8 billion. And President Franklin D. Roosevelt developed programs for unemployment pay, Social Security pensions, and assistance to labor unions. And by implementing those services, that brought the national debt to a total of $33 billion. Now we're really fast forwarding here, and we're gonna hop into World War II. And by the end of World War II, our US debt reached $285 billion. So now we're into an era that we know more about, that's more recent in our memories, and that's the 80s, 90s, and today. So President Bill Clinton was marked with tax increases, reductions in defense spending. He tried to get our nation's debt down, but it still reached $5.6 trillion by 2000. Then the Great Recession happened. We all remember that. That was all a more recent memory than we care to remember. And it's partly due to the tragedy of September 11th, because spending on homeland security and the Iraq war increased and the economy stalled. And then by 2005, national debt was more than $8.1 trillion. From 2007 to 2009, the US experienced a recession due to the housing bubble bursting and major government bailouts. By the end of 2009, the federal debt has grown to $12.3 trillion. And today, our government is $27 trillion in debt, and it's increasing every single day, especially due to the COVID-19 stimulus relief packages. And our highest expenditures are things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and national defense. So that's kind of how our country got into this debt crisis that we're in. And I think that really does explain how our society has adapted to debt and how we've decided to take on debt personally. And it's just a normal thing. And now I really want to talk about the student loan debt crisis. So now college is expected. It's no longer if you're going to college, but a when. And so in the early 1900s, about 5% of 18 to 20-year-old males attended college. That was just kind of the average in that day. And the average yearly tuition was $393 per year, or in modern day economy, it's about $9,500 a year. And so now about 30% of people attend college with an average tuition of $18,000 per year. So you can really see the increased cost and also the increased amount of students actually attending college. And here's the crisis. So student loan debt has reached 1.5 trillion in our federal student loan debt and 119 billion in private student loans. The average student loan debt per graduate is right around that $32,000 mark, and it disproportionately affects minorities and women. And that's actually really good to know for us, is that students who are minority or women actually take on more debt or have more debt instead of, let's say, the white male counterpart. It's just something that's interesting to know. And then there's also an economic impact on all of this. So because student loan debt delays home ownership by about 7 years, this can actually affect our economy in a negative way, because it causes a supply and demand to swing out of balance. And if more homes go up for sale, but fewer buyers are shopping, it could lead to lower housing prices and cause some other economic issues in our future. So this debt is not only impacting millennials, it's not only impacting Gen Z, it's impacting everybody in our entire nation. And how did this happen? Right? When I started to put together this webinar, I was really intrigued with how did student loans just become a natural thing? How did we just accept that as our reality? And it really stemmed back to, it's called Joe College and Betty Coed. So back in the 70s, it became a kind of like a stigma or like an idealized version of what men and women should strive for, is this Joe College who went to school and Betty Coed, who was having a blast at a 4-year institution. They had dreams of marrying their college sweetheart and finding a good job. And so these kind of ideas became the role model for that generation that was growing up during that time. And then in 1972, Pell Grants were introduced, and that actually made college become more accessible. And by 1978, financial aid focused from grants to then loans. And so that's when the shift happened to where students were taking on loans instead of applying for grants or expecting their parents to pay for college. And then in the 80s, we have this push to get our high school students into college. And there was about 40 to 50% of graduating high school students were expected to attend college in the 80s. For many to be considered middle class or to get a middle class job, it required a degree. So we've talked about our nation's debt, we've talked about student loan debt, and now I want to talk about the standard of living and how that's changed. So we have an increased standard of living now than we did kind of back in the day. We might have more as a society, we might drive nicer cars, we might have more stuff, but we're not happier because there's a reduction in unemployment and poverty, but there's still that cost of increase in the standard of living. So how did this happen? How did we just accept to spend more money and buy more stuff and take on more stuff? And it really does stem back to an increased amount of ads in TV and magazines and radio, because we see ads everywhere. We cannot go a couple of minutes in our day without being bombarded by ads. And that used to not be a thing in that Gen X faced. That was just not a thing. You might have heard an ad on the radio maybe once, twice a day, or you might have seen it on your like old tube TV maybe once a day, right? But now we are being bombarded by it. So they're really everywhere, and all ads all they do is create a sense of urgency that we're missing out on something, which actually causes us to purchase more stuff. And on top of that, we also have social media. And we see friends, family, and celebrities posting about their average everyday aspect of their lives. And that causes us to feel like we're supposed to be at their income level or we're missing out on something because of all the fun that the celebrities are having, or we have to buy whatever it is they're selling in order to be happy. And on top of that, we have an increased amount of consumption. And so things honestly aren't built like they used to. When my mom got married about 35 years ago, one of her wedding gifts was a toaster. Now, that toaster I grew up with my entire life. And you know what? My mom still has that same toaster. It's over 35 years old and it still works like a charm. My husband and I got married 5 years ago, and our toaster is already kind of quitting on us. We're going to have to buy a new toaster. So we know for a fact that things just aren't quite built like they used to be. And then we have a higher turnover in products, which makes them cheaper in the short run, but in the long run, that actually costs us as consumers more money. So that now that you understand what Gen X through Gen Z are facing, it's time to talk about how to make a positive change. And that's really what I want to focus on. We now understand everything that's happening. We understand their point of view. I really want to focus on how to make a positive change. So the question is, how do we do that? How do we combat this huge issue that our country is facing? And it's by this one sole thing: instilling hope. That's it. That is the biggest lesson that I can teach you if you are listening, if you're watching this. It's to instill hope, because there is always hope, always. So by instilling hope, I now want to talk about some financial wellness tips that I have for you. And these tips you can take, you can use for yourself, you can share with your kiddos, and I'll talk about how to do that in the next couple of slides. But what I want to talk about what financial wellness actually means. So financial wellness is feeling in control of your money and having the capacity to address a financial emergency, being on track towards your goals, and having the financial freedom to make life choices. That's financial wellness. And to me, that's like the picture perfect definition of an idealized life. So that's what I want to strive for here. And I think this is completely attainable for everybody. So here's some financial wellness basics that I can teach you. And then you can take these, you can use them yourself in your life if they're helpful to you. You can share them with friends, you can share them with family members. But the first tip that I have for you is to create an emergency fund. And that's just basic living expenses, 3 to 6 months of basic living expenses that you save in a separate savings account. So you're not tempted to tap into it, but you have it saved away for a rainy day. The second tip that I can share with you is to get on a monthly plan. And this is also a fun fact, but did you know that millionaires even make budgets? Millionaires who have all the money in the world, it seems like, they actually make budgets themselves. And I'd venture to guess that's how they became millionaires to begin with. This is honestly the number one financial tip that I can share with you, is to get on a plan and just know where your money is going every month. The third tip that I have for you is to pay off debt using the snowball method, and I'll kind of share what the snowball method is in the coming slides. But I want you to pay off debt and achieve financial freedom so you don't owe anyone anything. Think about it. If the car you drove up to your driveway, you owned. And then in your driveway, you owned your house, and everything in your house you owned. How amazing would that feel? Knowing that nobody can take anything away from you. If you were to encounter a financial hardship, everything that you touch is yours. And that's true financial freedom. And I want to help you get there. And then the last tip that I have for you is to invest 15% of your income, no matter what income level you are at. This will allow you to retire with financial security. And so we're going to dive into these in more detail. So 3 to 6 months of living expenses. What are living expenses? It's really the basic things like rent or a mortgage, food, insurances, things like transportation to get to and from work. Those are your basic living expenses. And if you were to add those up, and multiply that by either 3 or 6. Of course, I always recommend 6 months just to, be on the safe side. But if you were to multiply that, then you would have that number, and that's the number that you would shoot to save for, just in case of a rainy day. Worst case scenario, we are in a pandemic, we are in kind of uncertain times. Let's say you or your spouse lose your job because of the pandemic. How would that affect your finances? How would that affect your family? So by having this emergency fund, just think of the financial security that you would feel walking into every day at work, knowing that you and your family will be fine no matter what happens with your job, no matter what happens during this pandemic, no matter what, you and your family will be safe. And it acts as a buffer. And it creates a financial stability that allows you to just automatically pay for whatever that comes up. So Murphy does happen. Tires do blow out on a freeway. Unfortunately, things do come up, and think of just having the money and saying, yep, this is exactly what that money is for, instead of having to swipe that credit card and build up debt and then have to pay interest on that debt. Next, we're going to talk about how to get on a monthly plan. And so I like to call it a monthly financial spending plan, not to make it sound fancier, but the term budget, I have found it is not an exciting word to most people. People don't get as stoked about it as I do. So I decided to call it a monthly financial spending plan. It makes it sound like you are the CFO of your personal finances, and that makes you feel empowered and in charge. And it also has a less negative connotation. So that's what I'm talking about here with the monthly financial spending plan. And it's basically just a plan to help you get on track and make sure you're living below your means. It helps you stay accountable so that you are also on track to hitting your financial goals. And speaking of financial goals, it's important to set them so you know what you're working towards. There's a saying out there that talks about if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. If you don't create a plan, then you're just automatically going to fail because you're just kind of flying by the seat of your pants instead of creating a plan for your monthly finances. And this is, again, millionaires do this, billionaires do this. Everybody who has created financial success creates a monthly plan. And it's similar to if you were to want to work out and get fit, right? You would follow somebody who is fit and loves to work out, right? That's your kind of goal. That's what you're striving for. So it's the same with your finances, that you just want to follow the examples of people who have created success and wealth in their lives. And it's through this monthly financial spending plan. Then we're going to talk about paying off debt. So once you get on a plan, then you need to pay off debt. Actually, once you save 3 to 6 months of expenses, you get on a plan, then you pay off debt. And I recommend this as your number one financial goal, because debt it consumes your monthly income. It's amazing how all that stuff adds up. So, I do want to make clear that debt, when I'm talking about debt here, it's consumer debt, not mortgage. Mortgage it's a much larger expense. It's a much larger debt that you take on. So we're talking about consumer loan debt or consumer debts here. So things like student loans, car loans, medical debts. You want to make sure that you get your credit cards to a balance of 0, things like that. And think about it. If you were to pay off all of the debts that you currently have, all of your consumer debts, how much money would you have extra every month? I'm going to venture to guess it's at least a couple hundred, but it might be a couple $1,000s a month. So by paying off debt, you not only save money on interest, you not only create financial security and freedom, but you're also giving yourself a raise without ever having to work more hours in your job. And that's a win-win situation in my book. And what you can do with that money that you're now not putting towards debt, you can actually invest 15% of your income over your working lifetime, which is typically 45 to 50 years is the typical average working lifetime. And this will ensure that you retire with your current standard of living, or whatever your retirement goals are. And not only that, but it may take the financial burden off of your children. So going back to Gen Xers who are facing having to take care of their parents and having to take care of their children, right? By you investing now, it will save you and your children from having to take on that extra financial burden. And the biggest tip that I have for you when it comes to investing 15% of your income is to make it automatic, make it easy, make it so you don't even think about it. Because a lot of us can get carried away in the moment and forget about our future selves, the future selves of, it might be 15 to 20 years, but it might be 35 to 40 years down the road. You forget about that, right? And so by automatically pulling from your paychecks and depositing into a 401k through your employer or into maybe a Roth IRA will give you that peace of mind that you'll be able to retire and not have to change your standard of living. And of course, I always recommend talking to a financial advisor when it comes to this, and we'll dive into that a little bit more in the coming slides. So I just shared with you some 4 really big financial tips with you, and I have these 3 extra tips here that I wanted to talk about. The first one is to live below your means. So if you always live below your means, you will always be in the green. You will never be in the red. And this is actually a habit that millionaires have developed. Again, if you want to get fit, right, you're going to follow what the fit people are doing. If you want to build financial wealth and build that financial security, then you want to follow what the millionaires are doing. And they're on a monthly plan, they're investing, and they're living below their means. The next tip that I can share with you is to find contentment. And so learning to be content with your current financial status can actually help you achieve financial goals. And not only that, but make you a happier person in general. And so going back to constantly being bombarded by ads and just overwhelmed on social media, but if you kind of shut all of those things off, you kind of tune them out, you can actually find more contentment in your current life and where you're at now. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't have dreams or goals. I absolutely believe that. But if you actually find contentment where you're at currently, that will help save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, right? If you see an ad, let's say the Super Bowl ad of a car, right? Then all of a sudden, all of us want whatever that car is that's in that ad. And you know how expensive those cars are when the one that you're driving is perfectly fine, right? That is a huge extra expense that might also impact your current finances. It might impact your retirement, right? You might not save as much as you want to into retirement because then you're paying off that car. And it all stemmed back to an ad that you saw because of a Super Bowl commercial. So finding contentment really is key here. And then the last financial wellness tip that I can share with you is to get support. So you are not in this alone. You do not have to do this alone. There are so many resources out there, myself included, and others in your life can also support you in this journey. So if you have friends who are encouraging and supportive of you, reach out to them. You have so many different opportunities out there, and I'll share some with you in a little bit. But really do get support from your family, from supportive friends, because that's what's going to hold you accountable to the goals that you're making. And this is just a recommended budget percentage. Again, just recommended. It's not an ideal that you should reach for, but it will help kind of balance your life out. And it'll just give you a good idea of what to aim for. So it would be ideal if you could put 25% of your income towards housing, 5% towards utilities, 10% towards food, about 10% towards transportation, 10% towards health, 10% towards insurances, 10% for just personal stuff, 5% for recreation, which is kind of entertainment, going to the movies, things like that. And then again, 15% towards investing. And I know these percentages might not always work out this way. I know the majority of us probably live in Flagstaff, and our expenses here are much higher than in other areas of Arizona. And so this is just recommended. If you can get to this spot, that would be amazing. If you can't, that's also okay. So we've talked about some financial wellness tips, and now you have those tips. So the next thing that I want to talk about here is how to coach loved ones. Because coaching loved ones will help build a legacy of financial wellness. And there are many lessons that as parents, you will teach your children. Things like how to share, how to be kind and considerate, and countless other lessons, I am sure. But financial wellness and becoming responsible with money is another lesson that you can give your children and your loved ones that will pay dividends. The lessons that you teach your children will not only impact your children's lives, but I'm going to venture to guess it will impact their children's lives and their children's lives. So I want not only for your life to change, I want not only for your children's life to change, I want you to be able to coach loved ones to financial wellness for generations, to change your entire legacy. And I want to share with you some basic financial coaching tips. When it comes to our adult children, sometimes it can be a little hard for them to talk about money openly, especially money boo-boos, right? So using these basic steps can help you facilitate the conversation in a healthy way that invites them to share instead of you maybe prying open that door, right? So the first tip is to just understand the situation. Make sure that you fully understand their current financial situation, and then listen. Just listen without interjecting. That's, I feel like all of us can benefit from that communication skill, is to listen more. But listening really does help. It helps the other person feel more understood, and it actually welcomes a more open environment for sharing. So the next step after you listen is to then ask if you can offer the advice. Ask if they are open to the advice that you might have to share. And this creates an open door for a non-judgmental conversation that's centered around love. So when it comes to our loved ones, we want the best for them, right? We want them to have the most amazing lives and totally happy and right, joyous with rainbows and butterflies. But sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes, Murphy comes and tires blow, things just happen in life. So if we can kind of facilitate a conversation that's centered around just wanting to love them and wanting the best for them, wanting to help them set themselves up for better future success, by asking if you can offer advice, that just invites you and them to then start a conversation instead of it being you telling them what they should do and them not wanting to hear it. So do you see that difference there? So the third tip that I have for you is to provide information from your own life or the information that you've learned in this Comet talk. So I just shared with you a ton for tips for basic financial wellness tips with you, right? You can share those tips with your loved ones. You can also share tips from your own living experience. You have probably done a couple of things in your life that you wish you would have done differently financially because it impacted your finances. Maybe you wish you would have saved more for retirement. Maybe you wish you didn't buy that brand new car, right? There's a million things that we have probably done in our life that we could help the next generation do better. And so by sharing that and talking about that, we'll give them the resources to maybe learn from our perceived mistakes, so that they can set themselves up better. And then the very last thing is to inject hope. So no one is past the point of no return. And by encouraging your loved ones to move forward, and helping them realize that their current financial situation isn't their only option. There is always hope. There's always hope for better in their lives. There's always hope to get out of debt. There's always hope to save for those big, exciting life expenses like buying a house or a new car. There's always hope. They don't have to be stuck in their current situation. I feel like when we're in the weeds of it all, when we are drowning in debt or overwhelmed, we don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But if you, as a loved one, as you, as a parent, are saying, I know you can do this. I believe in you. You have done hard things in your life, and I know you can get through this, by saying those encouraging words and injecting hope into their situation, that's a game changer. So, right, those are all tips for adult children. Now we're going to talk about if your kiddos are young still. So you can teach them financial lessons that will serve them throughout their entire lives from a young age. The more money is talked about within a household, the more likely your children will be financially responsible. And I think the younger that you start talking about finances in a healthy way, the better. So the first tip is to model the behavior and actually act it out, right? To be the model example. So when you model the behavior that you're trying to instill into your children, it speaks volumes over what words ever will. If your kiddos see mom and dad having a financial discussion, as long as it's a healthy discussion, right? That might be a good spot to have them come in and listen to how you're navigating that conversation. It would just, I mean, think about how that would change the world if we all had healthy financial conversations and money wasn't taboo or something to be ashamed about, but it was just a natural part of life that we were all open to talking about, and we were all helping each other get better and grow better in this area. Think about how the world would change. So the second tip that I have for you is to put them to work. And I'm not talking about like slave labor here. I'm talking about allowing them to maybe do chores around the house, and giving them a little bit of money so that they can go out and buy toys or candy bars. This little thing can actually help teach them financial responsibility. I know parents who have a chore list, and their kiddos can choose from the basic chores of, making sure they fold their laundry or make their bed or tidy their room. And that, they get 50 cents every time they do that, or maybe 25 cents. And then there's another category of like extra things that they can do, things like doing the family's laundry or helping tidy up the kitchen after dinner. Those extra things that they can do are 75 cents or $1. And so it teaches your kids the value of hard work and that they get paid for their hard work. And because they get paid, then they can go out and buy whatever it is that they want to buy. Okay, the third tip that I have for you is to teach them savings. And so by opening up a savings account for them and actually teaching them how to use it and why it's important to save is invaluable. So obviously, if your kiddos are below the ages of like maybe 4 and under, they're really not going to want to sit down with mom and dad and talk about, hey, here's a savings account. They don't even know what that is. So this might be better for when they get ages maybe 7, 8 and beyond. Then you can actually teach them if the money goes in and it stays and then it grows, they can actually see those numbers themselves. And then the last thing that you can do is you can encourage them. You can continue this behavior well into their teenage years, and it starts to compound. And so when they want to buy more stuff and more things for themselves, they have a savings account. They understand the value of good work because as parents, you modeled the behavior. So you see how all of this kind of compounded on top of one another. And not only that, but you can teach them financial responsibility in the sense of maybe they want to buy a car and they've been saving for a car for quite some time now because you've established a savings account and they understand if they want to, if they want a car, they're going to have to go to work for it. And so this will just set your children up for success well beyond their teenage years. And some common questions that I get around kiddos and money, I get these two common questions. So the first one is, should I co-sign? And then the second one is, so when do I cut the cord? So let's talk about the first one. Co-signing loans is really tricky business, and I generally advise to avoid co-signing for your kids for any type of loan, including education. This is to safeguard your own finances, and it also teaches your children financial responsibility as well. So when it comes to college, there are many options that are more financially possible for kids, that is just cheaper, more affordable. Things like CCC, for example, it's a much more affordable option than going straight to a four-year university that your children can absolutely afford if they are working and they can go to school at the same time. But co-signing, by putting your own finances on the line, I have heard horror stories of they thought their child was financially responsible and then come to find out they weren't as financially responsible as they had thought. And then the parents have to take on an added loan because they had co-signed and their kids weren't paying the loans and it was impacting their credit. And so the parents just decided to take on the loans themselves. So again, I generally advise that you avoid co-signing for your sake as well as your children's sake. The next common question that I get is, when do I cut the cord? So as a parent, it's your financial responsibility to care for your children until they reach adulthood. And then once they reach adulthood, which is 18 years of age, it's up to you when you want to cut the cord and stop paying for things like insurances, phone bills, education, things like that. And you need to make a decision between you and your partner if a partner is involved, and then communicate that decision to your children. I generally recommend like a slow, gradual process and not like a, hey, you're 18, cutting that cord. That might be a shocker to your kiddos. But if it's a slow and gradual transition, right? If they want a car and you say, you can have a car, you just have to go to work and save for it and you have to pay for insurance, right? If they're 16, that teaches them financial responsibility. They save for that car and now they're making that monthly insurance payment. And then you maybe graduate to, it's time that you pay your phone bill. And then you graduate to, well, it's time for you to go to school. So here's how you pay for school. And because you set them up for success, because you've taught them all of these financially responsible tips that we're talking about here, it really shouldn't be a problem or an issue for your children, because it's just a part of the natural flow, instead of it being this, oh my gosh, I'm 18 and I have to pay for my own stuff now. How do I do that, right? It's not so shocking to them. Okay, some additional tips that I have for you here when it comes to education. Instead of co-signing for a loan or giving them money, if that's not an option for you, there are so many other things that you can give them. And you can give them the gift of financial education instead. Again, this will pay dividends. What they learn, if you give them a book or you pay for them to go to a course, or you enroll them in a free resource, which I'll actually share some free resources with you here today. But if you get them into and understanding financial responsibility, if you provide them that education, that will set themselves up, that will set your children up for success well beyond the age of 18. That will just continue to build and build and build as they get older. Another thing that you can do is to teach your children the difference between a want and a need. And this is especially important because of the fact that we are constantly bombarded with ads on a regular and frequent basis. And so, right, as kids, we want everything and we think that it's a need. We need that candy bar. We need that extra toy, even though we've got a million back at home, right? Kids don't have the ability to differentiate between a want and a need. And so it's your job as a parent to help them distinguish that difference. And again, this will help set your children up for success if they don't feel like they need that brand new car, if they have one that's driving around just fine, or they need that bigger house when they have a house that's perfectly fine. So do you see how this will just continue to compound and compound? And then the last tip that I have for you is, again, to lead by example. It's really the best thing that you can do, not only for your own financial security of if you're leading by example, you're safeguarding your own finances, you have that emergency fund, right? That's amazing for your personal finances, but that's also going to help your kids as well. So I have some helpful resources that I want to share with you. Financial planners, this is, if there's one thing you walk away from this course, if you have never talked to a financial planner, I want you to tomorrow make a call to a financial planner. There's a ton of them in the greater Flagstaff area, and typically they offer a first-time free consultation. And I highly, highly, highly encourage you to do that. And I'm going to share why in just a couple of slides. There's some free courses. One is actually Coconino County actually puts on this workshop. It's called the Financial Empowerment Workshop. And then the number to reach them is there, 928-679-7453. If you are in need of immediate support, Flagstaff Social Services will actually provide basic necessities. And there's the website there. If you go to coconino.az.gov, that is a great, great resource if you have family members or if you yourself are in immediate support or immediate need. And the last helpful resource that I have to share with you is the Keys to Prosperity is a self-empowerment program that helps individuals and families during COVID. And Coconino County actually puts this on. These are all amazing resources, and I highly, highly encourage you to take a look at them. So I want to leave you with one more thing before we get to questions. And I want to instill hope, right? I talked about why it's so important for you to instill hope. And now I'm going to instill hope in you, because I'm going to share with you how you can become a millionaire. So let's say you're living off of $35,000 a year. If you follow my rules here that I talked about, you invest 15% of your income, which is about $4,600 a year, or about $385 a month. If you're start at age 22 and invest that for 45 years of your working career with an annual return of 12%, which is the S&P 500 average, it will give you $8.2 million, and you'll become a millionaire at age 50. And again, this is living off of $35,000 a year for the entirety of your working career. That's never receiving a raise. That's never switching jobs. That's never getting a bonus. And you can become a multi-millionaire. Okay, so this one, in this example, we're starting at the age of 22. And you might be thinking, well, I'm a little over the age of 22. And I have an example for you as well. So let's say you're Gen X, you're around the age of 40, and you're making $40,000 a year. I'm assuming because you're a little bit older, you have more life experience, you've developed your skill sets, you're going to be making a little bit more money. And you, again, invest that 15% of your income, about $5,100 a year or $425 a month. And you're starting at age 40, and you do this for 27 years with the annual return of 12%, it will give you over $1 million. So even if you start investing later in life, there's still hope. There is always hope. And that's really the biggest thing that I can share with you today is no matter where you're currently at in your finances, there is always hope. So I did my fair share of talking here. And now it's your turn to ask me any questions that you might have. Are there any questions, Megan, that we can cover?
I don't see anything. And wow, you nailed this presentation to fall like exactly at 7 o'clock. Like I am very impressed.
Thanks. I had to talk a little fast, but we did it.
Yeah, I don't see anything on here, but we had a great turnout tonight. For everybody who's with us right now, I'll make sure that the information that Ashlee has provided, that it gets out to everybody. So, and we have recorded this tonight, so I'll make sure you get the link when we get this shared to our YouTube channel. So you'll be able to go back through it again. And we'll also include Ashlee's contact information because, there we go. Yep. Because she didn't include herself in the resources, but she is also a fabulous resource as a certified coach. So, yeah, it looks like we don't have anybody asking any questions, but feel free to send us an email if you do have any questions, and we appreciate all of you. You know what? Hang on. Okay. One of the questions was, what is snowballing when it comes to paying off debt?
Yes, we didn't actually talk about that, did we? Great question. So snowballing is when you kind of stack up your debt. So let's say you have credit card debt, let's say you have car, let's say you have student loans. And so you stack up all of your debt, you write it all down, and you write it in the order of your smallest monthly payment to your largest monthly payment. And you're going to want to focus on that smallest monthly payment first. And then once you pay off that first debt, then you take what you were putting towards that smallest payment, and then you take it and put it towards the next one. And so it creates the snowball effect because you start small, right? You start with paying off a small amount of debt, and then it gets bigger because you paid off that debt, and then the next debt, you are able to kind of compound that and pay it off quicker and quicker and quicker. And so when you get to your largest debt, you have this giant snowball of a payment that you are attacking that last and final debt with. And it's actually psychology. By doing this method, it actually, just because it's like an instant gratification thing, because we see, hey, we paid off that one payment, and then you get really excited about, hey, we paid off that next one, and it just compounds and compounds. And this is the best method, in my opinion, to pay off debt because it gives you that instant gratification, and it actually encourages you to keep going and keep going and keep going. So I'm so happy you asked that question because I totally forgot to talk about it.
And we have one other question. So it is we have another question. But first, it's when it comes to 15% investing, what do you mean by investing? Like, where do you recommend it go?
Yeah, again, great question. I always recommend investing into a 401k through your employer if you have that option. And then the second recommendation that I have for you is to invest into a Roth IRA. A Roth IRA is just an added investment account that you can have. And I believe the cap for it is about $5,500 a year is the max that you can invest into it. Those are the top two recommendations that I have. But again, I highly, highly encourage you to reach out to a financial planner and to sit down and talk with them and have that free consultation, because they will walk you through it much better than I can. They have all the licenses that they need to sit down and actually hop into your numbers and their numbers and the accounts that they can build for you. I can give you general recommendations, but beyond that, I'm going to put you in the hands of the experts of reaching out to those financial planners.
And I'm not sure if I fully understand this question. So Winona asks, do you prefer the snowball debt or avalanche debt? And I'm not really sure what avalanche is.
Yes. So avalanche is if you are focusing on the largest interest rate first, and then going to the smallest. I still, again, recommend the snowball method. That's a great question. Because of the psychology behind the snowball method, once you start to see, hey, I paid off that one, then you get really excited about paying off the next one and the next one. With the avalanche method, you might be stalled in the beginning because that initial debt might be a little bit higher than if you're focusing on the smallest debt first. So I mean, this is just psychology, human psychology. It tends to work better, but if you are a person that gets motivated by other means, that's, you do you, but my recommendation is always to do the snowball method.
And I've got one in the chat box that's more of a question of opinion. So Tristan asks, you mentioned the increase in price of education dramatically increasing since the 80s. How much responsibility is on large educational institutions for contributing to the student debt crisis? We can tell students to get a useful degree, but there's also some responsibility on the institution, perhaps? Question mark.
Yeah, that I feel like we could really sit down over a cup of coffee and really talk about that one. I mean, when it comes to student loan debt, it's really a crisis. And I think there are several parties that are involved. But primarily, I think it's just the advertisement of colleges in general. Colleges, if you were to look at NAU when they first were established, their college was small. It was, I mean, obviously, main campus or North Campus is beautiful, right? But it was small. It was humble in a sense. But if you were to look at NAU now, we have all of these extravagant kind of extras of the workout facilities, and our sports arenas are huge. And so it's all of these extra things it's advertising to the students to get them to come to the university. And at other universities, it's not just NAU that's doing this, it's all the universities, right? NAU is just competing. But it has turned into this competition of who has the better student resources, and it's kind of strayed from the focus of who has the better education. Now, that is not to say I went to NAU. I am an NAU alum, so I am not just speaking about NAU there. That was just an example. And NAU is an amazing school. But I think just universities as a whole are trying to market to students, but because of the marketing tactics, because of the added student resources and the fancy buildings and all of that, it has to raise the increase of tuition to afford things like that. So again, really, we could sit down for probably hours and have a nice cup of coffee and chat about that one. I could go on a tangent on that.
And we've actually got, we've got questions coming in. So Chrissy wants to know, and this one might involve a little bit more digging, but she asks, what do you suggest for a 58-year-old who works part-time?
Yes. Oh gosh, yes. I'm so happy you reached out, that you asked. Again, there's always hope. We would probably have to sit down over, a chat and talk about it in more detail, but I still think that you should invest a portion of 15% of your income, if that's feasible for you. By investing, you are safeguarding your future, and you still have the average retirement is 65 to 67, depending on how old you are. So your retirement age is probably 65, just based upon your current age, maybe 64 and a half. Anyway, but you still have time to invest, right? That window is closing, but you still have time. And there are a couple of opportunities that you have. You can kind of play catch up in, let's say, a Roth IRA. They allow you to invest more into a Roth IRA than you typically would, right? They kind of bump up that yearly cap of $5,500 to, I believe it's 6,100, but the numbers change every year. So we'd have to sit down and look at that, but there's always hope. And the fact that you're here on this call is amazing. The fact that you asked that question is amazing. So just because you're older doesn't mean you're late to the game. It doesn't mean that you're too far gone. I'm so happy that you asked that question. And it honestly would take some sitting down and looking at your finances and diving into it a little bit further, but there's hope. There's always hope.
And it looks like our last question is a question about the difference between a financial advisor and a financial planner.
That's a great question. Truthfully, I'm pretty sure it comes down to the different certifications that they get. And they might be one for one. I honestly don't know the difference between the two. I'm pretty sure it just has to do with a couple extra acronyms or not, but either one, financial advisor, financial planner, sit with them, get with them, talk about your finances, become the CFO of your finances. And that just, it gives you the, it empowers you and allows you to take control of your finances and then therefore your future. So whoever you sit with, just make sure they're certified and that you feel comfortable with them. I would encourage you to maybe reach out to 2 or 3 in town and just sit with them, have that initial consultation, and then go with your gut. Kind of with anything around money, if something feels off or like not quite right, then that's just a sign that maybe a different financial advisor or planner would be better for you. But we have so many in town that I know I'm sure all of them are amazing, but I know there's one that's right for you.
All right. Well, I would say that's about it. But yeah, anybody who wants to continue this conversation with Ashlee, we'll make sure you get her contact information. Ashlee, thank you so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate having you. And so everyone knows, Ashlee donated her time. You know, she did this for free, which is why we could offer this talk for free. So we really appreciate her taking the time to be with us and to share this information with all of you. I hope you guys have a great night tonight. And I will be in touch with all of the resources from this talk and to make sure you get the recording afterwards. I hope you all have a great night. Thank you so much.